Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay. Never comes again, another day like yesterday. Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.
Good morning, everybody. It has been a hot minute since I posted an episode, and I'm going to go for one now. I'm a little bit nervous about it. Maybe I'm medium nervous about it. In 60 some odd episodes, I've only had once that I started a episode and then scrapped it because things didn't come together. I'm usually I don't write things down. I don't make points. I know what I want to talk about, and it usually turns out organized enough in a cogent enough fashion that I'm able to roll with it. But today I wanted to talk about shame, the function of shame, to whom it belongs, and what that means for certain people in our population. So I'm sure that there are lots of sociological, anthropological explanations for shame. I haven't studied it deeply other than in therapy and psychology, its function and the healing of it. But I'm sure that, anthropologists probably look at, the human society and say that the human animal, given that we're very, very social and that our survival depends greatly on our social connections, that shame, that is going after someone's identity, who they are in relationship to their society. Not just like, oh, you screwed up, you got in a car accident, you hurt someone else, but you're a bad driver. It's your fault for who you are. That's shame, right? Guilt is, oh my God, I made the wrong choice and I was really tired and I got in an accident and the other person got hurt. I feel really guilty. That's probably a fairly healthy, pro-social, uncomfortable feeling. But shame is always and only about identity. You're this kind of person. And it's a very confusing thing because it's a weird message. On one hand, it's like there's all this reprobation, there's all of this judgment and punishment. And at the same time, the message is this is who you are. So then what choice would you have about shame? And so shame is, in my opinion, as a therapist, shame is the most powerful force on the face of the planet. I think shame is more powerful than the fear of death. And the example I hold up to demonstrate that is how military in time immemorial has enabled itself to convince young men 15 through 30, whatever, to be willing to charge into a hill with bullets pouring down at them with almost certain death. If you really think about it, why would anyone ever do that? Why would anyone ever do that? In many, many cases, not entirely necessary, right? Just some government, some politician somewhere said, this is what's going on and it's your duty to do this. Why? Well, the military knows why. The primary fundamental thing that the military does is they convince young men of their duty and obligation as a member of their society to the people back home. And I was not in the military, so I'm reporting the secondhand, so I'm happy for you to correct me if I'm wrong. The primary driver that they build in is that you are responsible for the man or woman to your left and to your right. And if you abandon your duties, you're essentially abandoning them and killing them. This is about shame, right? This is about shame and identity. So young men and women are willing to charge into situations in which there's a very good likelihood of death or maiming. They're going to lose their life, but they would rather lose their life than lose their identity. And the military has crafted their identity to be the most shameful, horrific thing that you could possibly do would be to fail your brothers and sisters on the battlefield. It would make you a dirty, cowardly, weak piece of crap, and you would never survive it. Okay, so I'm not arguing whether that's right or wrong, right? I'm not saying this with judgment. I'm just saying that that's how it works. And I'm holding this up as an example of how powerful shame is. That shame is the one thing, not the one thing, there are other things, right? Parents' desire to protect their children is far greater than their desire to protect their own life, right? So there are cases in which the human animal will value things over their own life, but there are not many. And I think probably the most common is shame, is identity issues, right? So shame is not the same as guilt. It's not the same as just plain old anxiety, existential anxiety. I'm afraid I'm going to be homeless. I'm afraid I won't be able to support my kids, right? I'm afraid whatever. Shame is a far, far more powerful, more intense emotion that most people find very, very, very difficult to face into, very difficult to challenge. And it's why social control is so powerful when we use identity, which is most of social control, right? It's most of social control, because if you didn't use it, most people in a level-headed state of mind are going to do what's right for them. And if what society deems as necessary isn't right for them, they'll find some way to circumvent it, right? A democracy is just rife with this kind of conflict. People doing things that are right for them, that society in general is like, yeah, but that doesn't work for all of us as a whole. You can take the idea of, oh, you're walking through the park and there's a field full of pretty flowers, and you think, you know what, I would just love to take one home and put it in a vase on my table, and you pick one. You're like, well, as an individual act for you, that's probably reasonable and that's really nice and you might really enjoy that. But if you set that as a policy and you say, well, what that means is everyone's entitled to, then hundreds or thousands of people are going to destroy that field of flowers, and then no one gets to enjoy it because they're all gone, because everyone stomped into that field and picked one for themselves. So the things that work for society don't always work for the individual, and there's this conflict. And the individual will tend to act in his or her own favor unless there's a pretty powerful deterrent. And so what society defaults to a lot is shame. Shame as social control. There's lots of religion that really has a beautiful intent, right? We want to truly be kind and loving towards one another and to have a spiritual relationship with one another. And then there's lots and lots built into the structure that's about nothing but shame. Don't be a bad person. You're being a bad person. Who you are is not only rejectable by society, but God, him or herself, rejects it. So lots of shame gets leveraged in religion because you have the idea of an all-powerful, all-knowing being backing that up. Shame. Okay. So that's the framing of it, but that's not really what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to share with you, I had an extremely powerful experience over this past weekend with a group of people with whom I interact. They are friends, they're colleagues. We all have deeply spiritual aims, and we all take very seriously and a deep intent to learn to love one another, to be non-judgmental, to care for one another the way we were intended to do, in a way that transcends the normal frictions and frustrations of life. And it's really a beautiful thing, and it allows a lot of healing. And so I spent some time with this group of people, and I had a very interesting experience. For any of you who know complex trauma or serious childhood trauma, people can have flashbacks. That's when a person's body and brain they don't just remember what happened, they literally, their body regresses into the state that it was in. And I've struggled with that. I've struggled with flashbacks my entire life until I got through somatic therapy and EMDR therapy. I was able to mostly heal it so I don't walk around that way day to day. And that was revolutionary, but I can still have some very, very deep, very strong flashbacks. And I had one in this experience that I think happened exactly because I deeply trust these people and because they're kind and loving people. What was so interesting about this experience is I think that I essentially regressed to infancy. A very, very helpless state, physically, psychologically. It wasn't even helpless like, oh, I'm trapped, I don't know what to do. I can feel that as an adult. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed and I feel helpless to adequately take care of my family or myself, you know, whatever. We all have those experiences. But this was more without thought, without the intellectual construction. My body was in this state of, it seemed like infantile helplessness. And all of my usual intellectual cogitation and coping and thinking and intellectualizing and problem solving and applying self-care and doing the things that I've learned to do to continue to function weren't there. And I revisited some deep, deep yearning, and I'll share with you what that is. I had a very conflicted, very abusive relationship with my mother specifically that involved some things that I won't repeat that I've probably said before that are pretty horrifying for a mother to do to a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old. And those things were severe enough, and the disconnection was severe enough that for my entire life, I never felt any sense of connection. You know, most people would be like, well, there's going to be abandonment issues and you know, there's going to be grief associated with yearning for a mother who you felt loved you and cared for you, et cetera, et cetera. I never had those. I wasn't bothered by it. I just felt that my mother must have had an incredibly challenging childhood. I mean, I went through periods of like years of extreme rage and anger and bitterness and resentment and all of that. But in the end, it was like I had lost the ability to see her as my mother. And I had displaced that in other places onto my older sisters, onto whatever, or just the feeling of like, I'm just this person who navigates reality without that sense of a loving maternal presence. Well, what I experienced was remembering that as an infant, that I had a deep, extremely painful yearning to feel loved by my mother. And it was a memory of what it was to be an infant and to be a child, and to yearn for people to care for me and to protect me and to stop the things happening to me that were happening during that period of time. And I know that my entire life, I'm very narrative, and I've come to realize slowly over the past 10 or 15 years that to a certain extent, I fetishize my own trauma. I mean, there are things that I can repeat that there isn't anyone who wouldn't be horrified that those things happened. And of course, the people in my family, my siblings, are almost completely in denial and will either question whether it really happened or maybe I just perceived things differently. And that's certainly what my parents, and especially my mother, accused me of, was lying about the things that happened or being confused about the things that happened or pointing out, well, those things didn't happen to the other kids. Are you sure they happened to you? And yes, they did. And I know that they did. But I look at my tendency to fetishize, and I'm a decent storyteller, and my ability, and I'm pretty descriptive. I'm pretty descriptive with language and very good at describing things that happened. And I've always had this overwhelming urgency, this feeling that I have to tell people. I have to tell people what happened. Almost like I'm saying, you need to know what happened so that you can give me permission to have the damage and to struggle with the feelings that I struggle with given what happened. And if you don't hear the story, if you don't hear what happened and acknowledge that it happened, then I'm forced to attempt to function like someone who didn't live through those things, right? And I've intellectualized my experiences a lot, right? So I'm very good at talking about them. I'm good at talking about them in a way that can be helpful for other people, that it can even feel helpful to me, where I feel some peace of like, I understand what happened. I understand why these kinds of things happen. I don't feel as angry anymore. But the truth is that buried deep, deep in my body and in my unconscious and in my brain was an enormous amount of shame that these things happened and that I had the emotional responses that I had, and that it did the things to me that it did that made it very, very difficult for me to do anything with my life or build anything with my life. And I spent probably much of the last 20 years working as hard as I could to build a life, to prove, in a way, I was simultaneously proving that, well, I can build a life, but also in a way that almost that those things didn't happen, or that those things couldn't have an effect on me that they did have. I didn't want to admit that they had the effect that they did have, right? And so what was very profound about this experience over this weekend was I was in the presence of people who were just going to be kind and loving and non-judgmental, and were going to do everything that they could to support me as I dealt with remembering what it was like to be treated the way I was treated, and to have the things happen to me that happened to me, that were directed specifically at me and not at my siblings. And I had this, what to me, maybe is not to you, but to me is a profound realization that there are people amongst us who have had experiences that are so disturbing to them, but also extremely disturbing to society. And also very, very disturbing to the people who did it, such that we, me being one of these people, spend our entire lives receiving the message from society, from kind people, from friends, from therapists. There are many, many therapists who cannot deal with the most profoundly disturbing events, and they don't know what to do about it. And their attempt to help heal starts becoming more and more muscular, more and more pushy. And they start driving to, like, get you to feel better and, et cetera, et cetera. When the truth is, and those therapists often do that because they've been through really disturbing things, right? Which is why they became a therapist. But the truth is, myself, and this is the population I'm talking to today. Anybody can listen to this episode, but I'm speaking to you. People who have had this experience where you experienced things that were profoundly disturbing, and you were afraid to talk about them or deal with them. You were afraid to even remember them, or even remember what it did to your body, or to acknowledge what it did to your body. And then the people that did it to you, either because they're sociopaths who just wanted to get away with it, or because they felt disturbed. Often parents who do terrible things to their kids feel disturbed by their own behaviors, and they cannot deal with the fact that they did it. And they cannot deal with what has to be true about them and how emotionally disturbed they are, that they were capable of doing those things. And so you have all of that laid in, where you experienced it and you feel disturbed and confused that it happened to you. And it's difficult to talk about, even though if you're like me, you feel this tremendous urgency to tell people what happened and to help make sense of it within the container of your society. But also good people and friends and relatives, especially relatives, if they know the people who abused you, they feel disturbed and they feel confused and they don't know how to deal with it. Most people will shut you down in one way or another, right? I'm 57, and my entire life, I can count on one hand the number of people who could handle me just saying what happened without arguing or fighting or blaming me or saying maybe it did. Even people who don't know you will be like, well, but are you sure that really, like, but kids don't always remember. They can't handle it. It's such a problem. It's such a problem, right? You can say, oh, I rode my bike down a steep hill and wiped out and got all scraped up and it was really terrible and I was scared, and people were like, oh yeah, oh my God, that's terrible. And they'll never question. Do you guys ever think about that? Nobody will ever question the veracity of that. But society in general, if you tell them something disturbing, instantly everyone's like, oh, yeah, but you have to be careful with memory. Are you sure? Well, but I'm sure they didn't really mean it that way. They might have done something like, guys, I'm talking directly to you, the people to whom, because the people who already say that shit are going to hear me saying this and they're going to do the same thing. They're not going to stop doing that. I'm talking to you who had these terribly disturbing things happen to you, that maybe you have chosen not to talk about it. Maybe you don't want to talk about it. But many of us feel a deep, deep urgency to say what happened because we know what happened. And we also know what it did to us. And we know that we paid the price for what it did to us. And we know that we're still paying the price. I want to say to you clearly, we've fed ourselves the lie, the illusion that society is empathetic and we've learned to listen. And, we've been through the Me Too movement where it's like, believe her, right? We can say all this shit all we want, but 90% of people still don't. Like, we can say that we're paying lip service to, and society's moving in the right direction, but you as the victim, I want you to know that historically those people are kind of bullshitting themselves. They still have a very, very difficult time dealing with what you lived through and dealing with you talking about it and dealing with you saying that it happened. They have a very difficult time. And I'm going to get to the point of why this is important. So number one, I want to tell you, I know it happened to you because I know it happened to me. And I know that 99% of the people you ever come across or talk to are going to be very, very uncomfortable. I talked to someone once, and I won't be more specific than that, but it's someone who should have been capable of listening. And confess to one of the things that I had experienced that isn't confusing, right? There are some things that you can be like, well, you say your dad's negative, but maybe you perceived it that way. Maybe you're like, okay, there's some stuff that you can throw some gray area, but there are some things that parents do is like, that's not confusing. Like child molestation is not, if a parent like touched your private parts and jacked off, that's not confusing. People can either just be like, well, maybe you're lying or maybe you misremember. But like, if that happened, there's no confusion about how disturbing that is and that that's terribly wrong. And that does very, very difficult things to you, right? So I shared with a person once exactly what had happened and said, blah, blah, blah. And the person kind of looked, eyes got big and like turned around and walked off and never came back. I want to talk, I'm talking to you specifically, those of you who have been through this. I know you experience this too, and I know it really, really hurts you. And I know if you're lucky to be able to afford therapy or have access to therapy, you go in and you talk about this. And sometimes we talk about how hard it is because yes, it helps to tell a therapist, but also therapists get paid to listen. And so sometimes we're like, I remember saying to my therapist, like, not trying to be offensive, but like, this is therapy. Like, we want to be able to say what happened in normal society. Why in the fuck do we have to pay some specialist to just talk about what happened to us? It's not even that unusual. It happens a lot. Right? It happened to me. It happened to you. It happened to other people. It happens to people you know. It happens to people who will never talk about it. Right? These things happen a lot. And some of those people are in denial and they can't talk about theirs and they don't want you to talk about yours. And some of those people have never experienced anything like that and they simply cannot wrap themselves around the fact that it does. It's some terrifying story. It's something that they see in movies and TV. So I want to say this also to you, that your experiences, things that you actually experience, get used and leveraged in scripts all the time as nothing more than motivation for a bunch of other shit to happen. Right? This is a particularly American thing, like American film. It's like, okay, at the beginning of the film, what we're going to have is we're going to have some psychopath break into someone's home and rape their wife and their daughter and murder them. But we're not really concerned with what happened to them. Really, what this is about is we just want the main character, a male, to have a right to extreme violence so that he can go and enact that extreme violence and we can feel comfortable because it's justified extreme violence. And then we get to watch a whole movie full of extreme violence because it's okay because of this terrible thing. And then when he kills that psychopath in a horrible manner, we're like, yeah, fuck that guy. Right? Okay, I watch those movies. I'm not criticizing that as a form. I believe a healthy relationship to violence is okay, right? Violence is part of us. We shouldn't play games. So I'm not criticizing that, but what I'm saying is disturbed, abusive behaviors, especially towards women and children, are constantly leveraged as a prop for some half-ass movie or TV show so that we can all feel titillated and outraged by the kinds of shit that happened to you and happened to me. Right? Because to a lot of people in society, all it is just a narrative. It's just some horrifying story that, you know, when they're getting drunk with friends and they get maudlin and sentimental, you know, they can tell, yeah, like my friend told me this, it's so sad, I feel terrible. And they'll tell your story and somehow make it theirs. Right? I'm talking to you, to whom these deeply disturbing things happened. I want you to understand that I know that they happened, and you know that they happened. I know what happened to me. I'm not confused. And I've spent 50 years with my mother specifically accusing me of being crazy and accusing me of exaggerating and accusing me of being so sensitive and saying that I have psychological problems and portraying me as incompetent and crazy and so artistic, right? But the implication was always just like so wishy-washy and touchy-feely, blah, blah, blah. And I fucking well knew exactly what had happened to me. And I had been talking about it for decades. And I've been attacked for it for decades in my family, in my own family. I know what happened to you happened, and I know that you know. And I know that when you feel disturbed and confused and have difficulty with timeline, that's just cortisol. That's just evidence that it happened to you. Because when terribly traumatizing things happen to us, we're flooded with cortisol and adrenaline so deeply that often people go into a freeze state and they end up having this fragmented narrative. And that's only an indication of how horrible it was, right? But the rest of society will use it to say, well, maybe, and she doesn't seem to really know exactly what I think maybe something happened, but I don't think she knows exactly. Like, oh man, they're going to gaslight the fuck out of you. But I know it happened. And you know it happened. So we walk around with these incredibly significant experiences, extremely painful experiences, disturbing experiences, experiences that disturbed us and overwhelmed us and made it very difficult to live a normal life and made it difficult to build careers and to have relationships and to be comfortable in sexual behavior and healthy sexual relationships, and encouraged, all these things that when you point out this clear correlation that everyone knows is causation, pretty soon society is going like, oh my God, like here you go again, and blaming it on the parents and blah, blah. And they're going to gaslight the fuck out of you because they can't handle it. They can't. Okay. I could do 2 or 3 podcasts on the ways in which society gaslights you and imitating the things people say, and you'll understand that I know, and I want you to know that I know. But that wasn't the point of this podcast. The point of this episode was shame. In those experiences, as I regress to actually a body state and a psychological, intellectual state, I remembered what it was to be an infant and to be a baby and to crave desperately for my mother to love me. For the first time, I remembered what it was to yearn for that. And to have someone who spent more time hurting me, laughing at me, crying when she hurt me. Right? And I know this is going to sound simple, right? But when you get it at a body level, there's not an intellectual, like as a therapist, I know it's true. The shame that a victim feels isn't their shame, right? The shame is on the people who do it. Oh, yeah, intellectually, you know that, but I felt it. I got it, right? I realized that I had spent my entire life walking around with my body loaded down with a feeling of shame that these things had happened. And also in the experience, what was so powerful was the realization, again, not intellectually, but in my body, the shame wasn't mine. It was my mother's and my father's, but especially my mother's. And I know that she feels horribly ashamed of what she did. And when I say I know that, what do we think gaslighting is? Right? Take it out of my experience. Take it into an experience where some guy date rapes. He drinks too much and he's supercharged and he kind of knows it's wrong, but he thinks, man, I really want this to happen. And she's full of shit and blah, blah. And he rapes someone. And then the next day realizes that was rape. That was not, oh, I was confused, or she sent mixed messages. She was saying no, and I raped someone, right? I'm a 21-year-old who raped someone. By the way, guys, when I'm saying that's not something that I did. I'm modeling a narrative for you. That person is going to feel intensely shamed, and all the gaslighting and avoiding and right. So when that victim comes and confronts that person is going to direct, not just like, hey, guys, that didn't happen. I don't know what happened. I don't know why that person perceives that. I hope they're okay. I wish them the best, but I didn't do that. right? I didn't have sexual intercourse with this person, blah, blah, blah. So generally someone who truly didn't is going to talk that way. But people who are ashamed will actually take their own shame and heap it on the victim to weigh them down. And because society is so primitive, society will buy it and go, oh, the victim should be ashamed. Oh, there's something, right? And this sounds crazy when you say it, but guys, this happens all the time, right? This happens all the time. So that person who raped someone will be like, oh my God, like I saw them, they were so drunk, I didn't have anything to do with it. And like I saw her hanging on all these different guys, but it wasn't me. I don't know what happened. So what they're doing is they're heaping shame and judgment and blame on the victim, because if they can silence the victim, they have a chance to escape, right, retaliation or punishment or judgment for what they did, but also they're trying to escape their own shame. They're trying to escape their own shame, right? So they're heaping the shame on the victim. And if society will look at the victim and go, yeah, like, I don't know, like she has had a problem with drinking and she's been sexually pretty loose and we've seen her with lots of different guys. I don't, like, maybe something happened, but you know what? You know, she needs to learn to have better boundaries. Oh my God, you can gaslight the shit out of a victim. And then society will participate in that because that's more comfortable for them. Because you have someone who's disempowered and struggling and feeling overwhelmed with what happened to them. And you have someone who's just very fiercely asserting it wasn't me. There's something wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with me. There's something wrong with them. Right? And society is like, oh, it's easier just to believe that there's something wrong with the victim. And so society will attempt to silence the victim and will feel uncomfortable and will shame the victim. Or at the very least, even people who believe that it happened will put this burden on the victim like, well, you need to learn to move on and heal and blah, 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 and will not allow them to just say, this is what I experienced and this is what it was like and this is what it did to me. Right? So now I'm speaking to you again, the people to whom these things happened. The shame that you feel was never yours. It might be in your body. It might be in your head. You might have actively participated in it. It might make you really mad that you feel ashamed, but you don't know how to get rid of it. But I know at a body biological level that the shame was never yours. It's not yours now. You don't even have to feel ashamed that you feel ashamed, because I went through that where it was like, I know it wasn't me. I know I didn't do this to myself. I know who did it and I know what they did. And now I feel ashamed that I feel ashamed, because why the fuck can't I heal and like get rid of this shit and move on and like have a life? I don't even give a shit about accusing anyone of anything or saying anything. Just I want to live I want a chance to live my fucking life. But then you're still piling shame because you feel shamed, right? I don't know where you are in the process, but the shame is not yours. It was never yours. The perpetrators feel terrible shame, and they're putting on this massive act, and they're manipulating society, and they're manipulating your family, and they're manipulating your friends, and they're manipulating around you because they cannot handle the burden of shame, or they choose not to confront the burden of shame that you are now having to work to heal. The shame that's costing you months, years, decades. In my case, it cost me half a century. At least. It was never yours, and it's not yours now. And go a step further from the perpetrators. Society itself cannot handle what happened to you. And when they cut you off, or they tell you it's not appropriate. And there are places it's not appropriate. You don't go to work and tell your boss or tell a coworker unless they really, really invite that, or you have some relationship outside of work. Like, work is not an appropriate place to work out your trauma. There are places that it's not appropriate to work out your trauma, right? Because that's not the purpose there. But you experience so much shutdown and so much lockdown on whether you can say these things or whether you can work on these things or whether you can re-experience them, to explore them or confront them, or just deal with the fact that this is actually how you feel. Because you'll spend most of your life faking it and pretending that you don't feel that way, because nobody wants to see how someone feels when they've been molested or abused or intentionally hurt at age 2 by a parent who then laughed about the fact that they hurt you. It's disturbing to society. They can't handle it. But I want to say to you specifically, clearly, it is on them that they can't handle it. It's not on you. There's not something wrong with you. They are displaying weakness and fear and shame, even people who were not the perpetrator towards you. Even people who are kind, good-hearted people will experience panic and fear and shame because they don't know what to do about the fact that these things happen, or when they encounter someone to whom it happened. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. They freak out. They get overwhelmed. And then you're left feeling isolated and more ashamed of yourself because you've already been shamed by the perpetrators. You've already been gaslit by your family. You've already been gaslit by society. And now someone who's genuinely good-hearted, who you thought was a good friend, is freaking out and sort of cutting it off and going, well, but are you sure? Like, I really do care. Like, I don't want you to feel this way, but, you know, maybe, I don't know, like, maybe you should go to, they freak the fuck out. So I want to say to you, here's me saying to you, the shame and the fear and the limitation is on them, not you. You have already lived through what you lived through. You have already survived what you survived. You have already lived through what you lived through. You have already survived what you survived. And now you're in the long, challenging, difficult process of healing it. You've chosen to be loving. You've chosen to be a good friend. You've chosen to build careers. You've chosen to overcome addiction. You've chosen to overcome PTSD. You've chosen to overcome depression. You've chosen not to just sit in what are the natural biological outcomes of being abused, molested, raped, tormented, mocked, sneered at, bullied, whatever it is. You've chosen to face into it and overcome it. And society is going to send you the message that you're still the problem. And in a backhanded behavioral way, through their behavior, they're going to communicate that you should continue to feel ashamed. But they act that way because they feel ashamed and scared, and they don't know what the fuck to do. I'm not saying this to judge them. I've been that person. On rare occasion, I've even had a client describe something to me that tapped into something that I had not processed, and I was so overwhelmed that I barely made it out of the session and had to go talk to my clinical supervisor and go see my own therapist to process what had got activated in me, because I had a limit. I couldn't sit with and make space for how terribly sad and horrific what that person was describing to me. I'm not judging those people. I am judging the fact that they pretend that you're the problem. I am judging the fact that they don't own the fact that they feel ashamed and they feel scared and they are limited. And we are a very important part of the human equation of the existential experience. We're an enormous part of the existential experience. And you and I healing these things and confronting these things and talking about these things is incredibly crucial to the human race stopping raping, molesting, hurting, fighting, beating, mocking, bullying. The fact that we can stand up and heal and move out of shame and to speak these things without fear because we've been through it is incredibly crucial to the human race moving beyond the mess of abuse and judgment and anger and road rage and criticism and shallow bullshit that we exist in. And they have you convinced that you're the problem. You're not the problem. Them accepting their limitation and their fear and pretending that you're where the shame resides when they feel ashamed of themselves for not being equal to the task of accommodating and encompassing all that is the human condition. And we are part of the human condition. We're a crucial part of the human condition. And they can't handle it. And they keep pretending that you should be quiet and that you should feel ashamed. If they don't say it, they communicate it through action and behavior. You're not the problem. You're the solution. And I know it's really, really hard, sometimes brutally hard. I've had multiple times in my life where if I had had means, there's a very good chance that I would have taken myself out. I in between those times, I made sure that I never had means. Because I was a fierce fighter. I wanted to stay in. I wanted to stay in and make something of this. And you're the same. You're staying in and making something of it. Even when you feel like you can't anymore, you're doing it. Do you understand how important you are? Do you have any idea how crucial you are to the human condition getting better at all? If we cannot discuss and accommodate those who are unhoused, if we cannot discuss and make space for the people who are healing rape and molestation and childhood torture and sex trafficking and bullying and verbal abuse and parents who are just cruel and miserable to their kids, if we cannot accommodate and make space for, all we're admitting as a society is we're scared and ashamed and limited, and we're accepting our limit. You're not the problem. You're not the weakness. You are not the shame. They feel ashamed. They feel scared. But on the surface, they've gathered together enough things, a nice enough car, a respectable career. They've learned how to behave in an appropriate way, and they can be there for their friends when their friends are like, oh my God, I need a ride from the airport, or feeling sad today. Hey, let me give you a hug. Hey, that's love. God bless. I love it. I don't want to judge you. But again, this is for a specific population of people. I'm talking to those people like myself, like other people who experience some of those more horrible things. You are not the problem. You are the solution to the human condition. And when those people look shiny and they have everything put together and you feel that conflict in you where you're like, you resent it because you're like, I know that they were able to succeed at that level because they didn't have to fight through 24-hour a day PTSD and sleeping 2 hours a night and going into situations and feeling so agitated and anxious that you can't think and you can't talk. Like, they didn't have to do that. I'm saying to you, I'm talking to you. Don't be confused by the shininess of their life. They're scared and they feel ashamed that these things happen and they don't know what to do about it. So they prefer to pretend that the shame resides in you or the problem resides in you or it's just your responsibility. Well, you know what? They left you alone with it, but you can handle it, and you have handled it. And as you handle it and as you heal, you will become an answer to the human race that they can't imagine. And this is not to put them down. Everybody has their burdens. Everybody has their tasks. But again, I'm talking to a specific population now who gets left out of the conversation because what happened to you was so disturbing and horrible that nobody wants to hear about it and nobody wants to talk about it. And even therapists sometimes struggle with it and they get too muscular trying to push you to fix it because it's hard for them to sit with it being what it is. It's hard for them to even see it activated in your body and in your face. I'm here to tell you it's okay. It's okay to feel it again. It's okay to go back and feel it. It is what happens when you're treated that way. It's what happens when those kinds of things happen to somebody. It's not your job to not have the damage, to not take the damage. It's your right to be honest about what happened to you. It's your right to feel what you feel given what happened to you. It's your right to know that the shame isn't yours. It was never yours. The people who did it to you are lying, and they're going to lie and obfuscate until the day they die. It's not because there's something wrong with you or that you shouldn't say what's true. It's because they see themselves as weak and shameful, and they do not see themselves equal to the task of forgiving themselves for what they did and then coming to you and saying, is there anything I can do to repair and take responsibility for what I did? They do not feel equal to that task. You and I both know that all they ever had to do was forgive themselves and come and say, I did terrible wrong to you and I see how you've suffered. Is there anything that I can do to help repair and take responsibility for what I did to you? And you would have a massive healing experience, but they won't do it because they feel ashamed and they feel scared. And they don't respect themselves or believe in themselves enough to think that they can do that. They know it's the right thing to do. They know it. Don't let anybody kid you. They know it's the right thing to do. They, in their defense, are using their own trauma and their own abuse as an excuse to go, I didn't mean to do it. It wasn't my fault. My life was harder. My childhood was harder, blah, blah, whatever. They are going to construct a narrative that gives them permission to accept themselves as weak and shameful. And they feel weak and shameful. I don't even see them as weak and shameful. So to close this segment, okay? I'm talking to that population that had terrible things, disturbing things happen to them, perpetrated by aunts, uncles, parents, siblings. Rape, molestation, bullying, inflicting serious pain for the fun of it, laughing about it, never caring that it happened, and then mocking you because you had an emotional response, that because you struggled with your nervous system, because that's what a nervous system does when you torture it, is it becomes a tortured nervous system. Duh, motherfuckers. Are we confused about this? You torture a nervous system, it becomes a tortured nervous system, right? You experienced that. And they put it on you. And I'm telling you, I am one person who knows for a fact that it has nothing to do with you. You are not shameful. You might still struggle with the shame in your body, but you don't deserve it, and it wasn't yours, and it isn't yours. It was never yours. And I'm one person who knows it, and I will say it. If you have any chance at all, I want you to find a community that is as loving and non-judgmental and as supportive as a community that I found. Because it was in that community that I was able to finally, more importantly than saying it to other people, to admit to myself how I felt about certain things. Massive and overwhelming lack that I lived through. Abuses that I lived through. Lies that have been and are still being put on me as if I am the problem. Right? I'm still getting to know myself. I'm still fighting out from under the burden of that. But I've come far enough that I know the shame was not mine. The shame is not yours. It was not yours. The more people shame you and silence you, all that means is that's the more scared and the more ashamed they feel. They see themselves as weak and incapable. And sometimes they don't have the skills. Not everybody's a therapist. I've been a therapist for over a decade. I know what to do and what to say when someone confesses some horrible thing and they feel horrible shame and they're overwhelmed and they start shaking in the room and crying. Okay, to be understanding and forget, like I'm a therapist, I know how to do that because I had a therapist who made space for me to do those things. And so society in general doesn't know necessarily what to do, but they won't admit that it's like, I don't know what to do, right? They could just say, I'm so sorry. I feel so overwhelmed and I'm so scared to see what horror you went through. And I feel so bad for you, but I don't know what to say or do. They could do that. They could be honest. They could do that. You can do that. Anyone can do that. You don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to be equal to the task of walking someone through a healing process from rape or molestation or horrible torture or torment towards a child. You may not have those skills. But if you're not accepting fear and shame about what this person is confessing to you, you can just tell them, I don't feel equal to this task and I'm so sorry about what happened to you. And I care about you and I wish it didn't and I don't know what to do and I'm scared. Those people who go through this trauma, the people I'm talking to and me, that's all we need. Just be honest. Just be honest. That you feel scared and limited and you don't know what to do. Don't shut us up. Don't try to make us stop talking about what happened when we've spent an entire life with society doing everything that it can to go, don't talk about this. We don't want to deal with it. It's disturbing and scary and we don't know what to do. Well, guess what? Every year, there are more and more people who know what to do. Therapists who are deeply, deeply trained in terrible trauma, EMDR, trauma resiliency model, emotionally focused therapy, somatic therapy, like there's so many, I just can't name them. I name my favorites. Eugene Gendlin's focusing. We know now what to do. We know what to do. And it might take a long time, but it's worth it. It might take a long time, but it's worth it. Okay. I feel like there's so much to say on the subject, but I do like to keep things within a scope. And so I want to end by advocating for society and those people who are good-hearted people who get scared and feel ashamed that they don't know what to do and inadvertently shut down trauma victims and people who have lived through really disturbing, horrible things. In fact, I want to advocate even for the abusers, right? You take my parents, take my mother. In the end, the shame isn't hers either. Right? The shame's not hers either. She doesn't feel horrible, horrible shame about what she did. I mean, she behaved the way she behaved because she felt horribly ashamed and weak and disturbed because she had not dealt with what had happened to her. And so then she dumped it on me. So the shame is not mine. The shame is not hers either. She could come and apologize. She wouldn't have gaslit me for half a century if she didn't feel ashamed. And if she hadn't taken on the shame of her childhood and the shame of her parents, and they took on the shame of their parents and the shame of society, and on and on and on and on and on. All of these people with identity shame, terrified about who they are, who they think they might be, right? Oh, I abused my child. Am I a child abuser? Someone who raped, are they a rapist? Someone who destroys their family through alcoholism, are they an alcoholic? Or a human being with unresolved trauma who needs help, who needs to get to say what it is and feel what they really feel? So where is this shame from? Like, if it just gets passed on and on and on, what the fuck is it? What is it that the human race, out of all the things that we do to one another through evolution, and we have rules and we have laws and we control one another, and it's like, oh, you come to a four-way stop, yield to the person to the right. Oh, if you steal from someone, you might go to jail or you might have to recompense. Like, whoa, all of this stuff that we do to function as a society. Why is it that there's this one massively powerful, sometimes it's social control, but a lot of times it's just abuse? Shaming me didn't help. I wasn't a bad person or bad. I wanted to do right and to do good. I would have contributed way more to my society if I had not spent all of my childhood, teens, 20s, and 30s being shamed by the people who abused me. So it didn't serve a social purpose. It served a purpose of protecting my parents from what they did. But other than that, they were just protecting their own shame. So it was just shame protecting shame. I don't even blame my parents, because the shame that they carried and acted under was there because my grandparents were protecting their shame. They couldn't be like, so what is this thing, shame? Which is always about identity. It's about who you are. It's about who you are. You're this kind of person. You're that kind of person. Okay, so we come to the spiritual message. Spiritual leaders much better, much greater. Well, I'm not a spiritual leader at all. So spiritual leaders, period. People other than me, who are spiritual leaders. Many of them say that, one of the primary tasks on the face of this planet is for us to be lost to who we are and to remember who we are. As divine consciousness, as a conscious being who is a being of joy, love, connection, creativity. These beautiful, beautiful things. We are free. We're free to choose. We're free to be conscious. We're these beautiful things. We came here to forget that so that we could consciously choose our way back to remembering who we are. So this message is out there that this may be what we're doing here in this very difficult reality. So isn't it interesting, if that's true, that shame, I think, seems to not really have a valuable social function. It does way more damage than it does help society. It's extremely limited. It recreates itself over and over and over. Like, shame didn't help my parents. It made them abusive people. Shame didn't help me. It made me unable to heal from the things I experienced for a long time. It's shame that locks you up and makes you unable to process those experiences. It's not the experience itself. You can heal from incredibly painful, difficult experiences. In fact, you can do it fairly quickly. It is shame and fear over your identity and what you are. Maybe I'm someone who deserves to be treated that way. That's identity. That's shame. It is shame that locks us up and makes us unable to heal and to learn beautiful lessons and to remember who we are. It's shame. So what is this thing, shame? It seems to be this force as sure as gravity that recreates itself. And if you remain unaware of it, if you remain unaware of who you are as a beautiful conscious being who's full of love, joy, presence, creativity, wonder, connection, care, and love for your fellow humans and fellow living beings, shame more than any other force, seems to be the primary gravity and function of obscuring who you are from you. And it doesn't really have a useful social function. No matter what any anthropologist says, well, it does way more damage than it contributes. Way more damage than it contributes. You could make the argument that Hitler was operating out of a deep sense of shame. I won't go into that, but look into his history. It does way more damage. I do not think it has any social value whatsoever at all. What is it doing here? If this is a system, spiritually, if this is a system in which shame was built in, it is the veil of forgetfulness. It is the thing that helps us forget who and what we are. A beautiful, divine, conscious, sentient being capable of free will, free choice, that's full of joy, creativity, connection, love of fellow living conscious beings, capable of incredible power and beauty. It may be the thing that was built into this very difficult reality, designed to help us forget who we are, and it is the primary thing that we have to overcome to heal and remember who we are. As such, it may have been divinely created. I don't know. You're way past my pay grade. But what I know that I believe for sure is shame serves no useful social function at all. It does way more damage than it contributes. And I don't think it has an evolutionary existential explanation that's satisfactory, which suggests to me that it is a thing that was designed to make us forget who and what we are. Because again, we're capable of healing from incredibly painful experiences. The experiences that were just physical for me, I healed decades ago, no problem. What was hard was all the messages that were sent that it's your fault. This happens to you because of you. It's not me. We didn't do it. I wasn't the problem, right? The parent saying that you were the problem. It's the shaming that is extremely heavy, extremely difficult, and extremely confusing. It is a very elegant mechanism designed to make you forget who and what you are. You are conscious. You are free will. You are choice. You are love. You are curiosity. You are connection. You are power. You are a lovely, loving, conscious being. Isn't shame interesting? I like that as a stopping point. But for the population to whom I was speaking, I want to go back and say again, inadvertently or intentionally, society at large has done everything it can to shut you up, to silence you through behavior, through designating space after space after space as a place in which it's not appropriate for you to talk about what happened to you. It's not appropriate for you to show how you feel, talk about how you feel, let alone show that you actually feel that way, demonstrate it, as I was over this past weekend. You have been silenced in a way that is a message was sent to you about your identity. What happened to you didn't happen to you. You made it up. It wasn't as bad as you say it was. Well, the truth is somebody else would have been fine if it happened to you, to them. Or maybe it didn't happen. Maybe you're just wishy-washy. Maybe you misremember. We don't want to hear it. Well, you should have healed. Why is it taking so long? Society in general has gaslit you and deepened the shame that was put on you by the perpetrators, who directly told you it was your fault, there's something wrong with you, or you don't remember, that didn't really happen, that never happened, I never did anything like that, I was an amazing parent, how could you say such a thing, I was your loving uncle, I was all of that bullshit and lies. I'm telling you, I know that they're lying to you. I know that you're telling the truth. I know they are lying. And I'm telling you, if you still experience shame, you don't need to feel ashamed that you feel shamed. The shame is not yours, it is theirs. They feel ashamed and they feel too weak to own what they did and to heal their own shame and their own traumas and come to you and say, I did terrible things to you and I see that you have suffered horribly because of it. And I cost you so much. And I only want to ask, would you allow me to repair with you in the hopes of undoing some of the damage that I did? And would you allow me to say that I'm sorry? They don't feel equal to that task. Can I say it to you for them? Or can I say it to you if I'm the person who hurt you? I did not feel equal to the task. I felt overwhelmed with my own shame. And I did terrible damage to you. And I see that you've struggled and it cost you a lot. And I would ask you permission, if you will allow me to repair, or even just to say that I'm sorry. I will await your direction. The shame is not yours. And I know it's not. I love you guys. Talk to you next time. Take care.
Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.